Explore today's must-have trends and innovative styles at Mrs. B's Clearance and Outlet. Shop one-of-a-kind finds in today's must-have trends. Explore wall-to-wall deals, furniture, flooring, mattresses, home accents, seasonal favorites, and more. Discover unique new home decor, pillows, accessories, and more. There's something perfect for your style and budget. There's new inventory every day at up to 80% off suggested retail. Discover the style and savings of Mrs. B's Clearance and Outlet.
Did you know that more than 113,000 children are waiting to be adopted from foster care? Ellie was one of them. When she was placed in foster care at 16 after experiencing significant abuse, she felt unlovable. Thankfully, Ellie was adopted with help from the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. Today, she's planning on college and has a bright future. But more than 20,000 teens age out of care every year. You can help. Visit davethomasfoundation.org/learn more.
West Memphis 3. West Memphis 3.
Damien Echols and Jason Baldwin, Jesse Miss Kelly, who
West Memphis 3.
They were just 8 years old. Stephen Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers found murdered, hog-tied and naked in a drainage ditch in West Memphis.
West Memphis 3.
the state stands behind the convictions.
From my understanding, there were two Jason Baldwins. I've always wondered when Miss Kelly's giving this coerced confession, do you think that he was speaking of the Jason Baldwin that they arrested, or do you think he was just speaking to the whatever persons they were going to try to?
No, he knew exactly what he was saying, and the reason he said it was because that's what the cops wanted him to say. And Jason and Damien were inseparable. They were like adjoined twins, literally. I mean, they did everything together, but they weren't very much alike. But it doesn't forgive those attorneys for not putting on an alibi defense.
Right.
They had an alibi.
Are you able to take us through that a little bit? The alibi?
Yeah, because that was the one day I was at trial.
Mhm.
It was when after the jury went in the jury room, I wanted to see what was going to happen, obviously, because I was thinking, there's no way, surely to God, they're going to convict these guys because there's no evidence. And so I was stunned when they came back, and the judge read the verdict and asked Damien if he had anything to say. And my recollection was he said no. In fact, I think he just shook his head no, and the judge made him say it out loud. I remember very clearly Jason saying, "Yeah, I'm innocent."
Right.
And that was the only 2 or 3 words that he got to say during the entire trial. And he begged his lawyers to let him testify, and they wouldn't do it. They didn't put on any defense. It's like they were scared to have their own trial.
The jury would have seen, like you were talking about, between the contrast between Baldwin and Echols, that would have been apparent and obvious to the jury that these are two very different personalities. Had Baldwin taken the stand.
For people who, it's sort of like losing a child. It's something that if you've never experienced it, it's hard to understand. But let me try to make it understandable. And it was one of my goals in the book to do that, and I may have failed miserably. But I wanted to explain to them just how bad the satanic panic was. And in this day and age of fake news and the deep state theories and all these crazy notions on the internet, back then it was devil worshiping, and this was a satanic ritual, and that was their theory, and they stuck with it until they found their scapegoats. And Damien was the prime suspect because he was the standout. If it was 101 degrees and 100% humidity outside, he wore a black trench coat, black pants, and combat boots, and a black T-shirt underneath.
The way that persons try to tell this story on the internet or on different podcasts that claim to have a great understanding of the case is they make it sound like Jesse just willy-nilly all of a sudden decided, I'm just talking and telling and having a good time and telling the story how it happened. And no, a lot of that was people pulling this out of him and setting him up to fail miserably.
Our psychologist called it cheating to lose. Jesse will agree with anything you say just because he's trying to hide his intellectual disability. I started out, as I stated in the book, first person I called was Park Dietz because of the Dahmer case. He was the shining star in criminal psychology at the time, and I knew if he read this confession that he would be able to punch holes in it. But he wouldn't even talk to me till I wrote him a check for $15,000.
Right.
And I didn't have 1,500
Right.
to do that, or 150 probably at that time. So we ended up with not the best, but the worst. If I'd been smart enough to read John Grisham's book, A Time to Kill, I would have thought to ask my psychologist if he had a damn license or not. And he didn't. So it was like a nuclear bomb going off in the courtroom. The guy lied to us when we confronted him about it. Burnett wouldn't give us a continuance to find somebody else to evaluate him, naturally. The kid's never had the best of anything in his life except for Richard Offshay and Warren Holmes, and some may say myself, but I started at the top everywhere I went, and I got the best person on the planet for false confessions, and I got the best person on the planet for polygraph, which Miss Kelly passed, but Burnett wouldn't let in, even though there was case law from the Supreme Court, including an Arkansas case that said any evidence tending to show the innocence of the client is admissible, but he wouldn't let it in, naturally.
Well, and you were, outside of being an attorney, you were teaching law for a period, right?
Yes. I taught criminal justice and the Constitution and a sociology class too.
And I think that's how, you had to, once you take your anger out, I think that's how you have to kind of deliver the story of like a teacher would, standing in front of the class. This is the way it was.
Yeah,
this is what happened.
Thought of that. That's a good point. Very astute. And the day of the Alford plea, even though I didn't understand it, I felt like the world had been lifted off my shoulders. And then Pam Hobbs and
Mark Byers.
I'm sorry. It's been a long week and a long day, but they both came up to me in the courtroom and made me promise that I'd find the real killer. So I went from being done with this nightmare to the nightmare starting over again. But what can I say? So here I am all these years later looking for a killer, and I've actually got a suspect.
Well, and let's go down, let's table that for a second. But because we brought up Mark Byers, he, in my opinion, I hate that. I mean, the whole, let's try to, I'll try to make light of the situation as best one can, given the severity of everything, obviously. But Mark Byers, to me, is somebody that could have had his own reality TV show. You could just put cameras and follow this guy around, and you can't take your eyes off of him for whatever reason. He's kind of stole the show, if you would, during the Paradise Lost stuff. But you met him several times. What was your first encounter with Mark Byers like?
Well, it was still in the day when I was absolutely convinced that he was the one who killed the kids. And I was doing a live feed from New York on Court TV about Damien Echols' Rule 37 hearing. I completed my segment, and Byers was next. And so this is the first time I'd been within, 50 feet of him.
Striking distance.
Yeah, exactly. Or shooting distance.
Yeah.
Might be a better way to put it. He came up to me and shook my hand, and I thought he'd broke my hand. I really did. And I took that as a warning to back off.
To
And,
say he's a big boy would be an understatement.
I'm a very large human being, but I'm a dwarf compared to him. And it felt like his hand wrapped around mine twice when he squeezed it. And I literally thought he had broken my hand. And I took that as a warning to back off. And of course, I didn't back off and wouldn't, because I had a duty to my client. He and I actually, by the time we met again, we were on the same team. And I think he realized that, that was pretty stupid of me to act like the clown on Paradise Lost 2, because it drew a lot of attention towards me.
I think they kind of wound him up a little bit, though, don't you?
I'm sure they did. And the second film was, there's no question about it. It was an advocacy film for the West Memphis Three by then, which almost didn't happen. HBO was threatened to be sued by the Hobbs family for making another film, and they almost canned it
to make the third one.
No, the second one.
The second one. Why?
Yeah,
why would the Hobbs family go after them to cancel the second?
Because this makes them relive it every time something else comes out, and I'll go ahead on the record and apologize for that happening again. And I don't completely understand their pain, because they had 8-year-old who passed away. My kid was 34, but I do understand better than I did then. And it's horrible. But I remember, because I found it in my file when I was writing the book. I didn't put it in the book, but I actually remember writing a letter to the executive producer at HBO, Sheila Nevins, begging her to let this come out, let the truth come out, and let the film come out. And of course, as it turns out, I ultimately determined Byers couldn't have done it, because I could account for every second of where he was at the time of the murders.
When I saw that in your book, I jumped off of my couch in celebration, because he was an easy. He didn't do himself any favors. Like, he looked guilty on camera, But one thing we did when we covered this case on True Crime Garage back in 2016, and we did everything we could in 2 weeks' time to pull together all the information on the confirmed timelines of the night that they went missing up until past the time that the boys were found. And we pulled several sources to confirm everything. And one thing that we said at the end of those 3 hours of our coverage of the case, we said, we can't tell you who did it. We can tell you who didn't do it. And one of those persons is Mark Byers, because we could not find more than a 3 to 5 minute gap anywhere in that timeline that he was alone. Yep. And so, as guilty as he looked on camera in Paradise Lost 2, he just simply couldn't have done it. and to hear somebody of your level and expertise to say the same thing, I felt pretty proud of myself in that moment.
Well, you nailed it. You definitely did, for sure. And one of the best parts of Paradise Lost 3, Purgatory, I believe was the name.
Yep.
Was the David Letterman's top 10 reasons why I didn't do it and Terry Hobbs did.
Why do you think that this is something I've always struggled with? Why the hell didn't West Memphis PD pull in a bigger outfit to take on this case? In your opinion, I get this will strictly be opinion, but
well, Mara Levert has pointed that out, and I don't know if it was in Devil's Knot. I think it was.
There was some,
might have been her subsequent book,
potential shady activity going on.
Yes, there was not potential; it was actual. The FBI set up a sting at the Greyhound Park in West Memphis. And someone faked a 911 call and said there's a drug deal going down in the parking lot. And the drug task force that Brent Davis had exonerated earlier.
One of the prosecutors.
The chief prosecutor.
Yep.
And he had said he looked into it and everything was fine and dandy. But the feds came in and set up this sting, and all these guys show up, and what do you know? Some of the money doesn't get reported to the evidence locker. And some of it was found in a shoebox under an officer's bed. The bills were marked. And so at the time of the murders, the Arkansas State Police, who are much better equipped to handle major crimes, because that's what they do, the West Memphis Police wouldn't let them in because they were pissed off they were being investigated. And there were convictions. Now, I will say this, out of fairness, the officer who had the money under his bed must have had the best lawyer, and he is a good lawyer because I know who it is. It's Bill Bristow from Jonesboro. He got acquitted of that, even though the money was under his bed. So
How about that?
hats off to Bill. Everybody knows he's a great lawyer, but I don't know how he pulled that one off.
And meanwhile, we say, didn't call in a bigger, better outfit with more resources, which they should have done. I mean, this type of crime is extremely rare. I mean, that's all I do for the last 8 years is cover crime stories. And I cannot think offhand of another situation where there's, other than the yogurt shop case down in Texas.
Yeah, in Austin.
It's anything similar. And so it's extremely rare. But meanwhile, they do contact the FBI, John Douglas, Ken Lanning, and the two of the experts. I mean, if there was a mountain of experts, these guys are at the top of it. And these guys are saying satanic ritual killing, no, doesn't really exist, doesn't truly happen. And yet they pursued this avenue instead.
Well, they had to because they were stuck with Miss Kelly's confession. They couldn't come in and say, "Oh, we made a mistake, but we're still going to try them anyway." And that's fascinating because that is in my book, and sitting here at my desk, probably writing the book a couple years ago, and I get this text message from a friend of mine. Actually, it was my prosecutor's wife, Kimberly Warmoth, and she said, "I can't even listen to an audible book without your name being mentioned." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she texts back and said, "John Douglas talks about you in his book." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And I didn't know.
The Cases That Haunt Us, I believe, is the one.
It's sitting right here in my bookshelf. Let's see. Law and Disorder.
That's correct. Law and Disorder. And I think you're probably mentioned in the Cases That Haunt Us as well.
I need to look that up because I didn't know about that one either. John Douglas worked on the case with us. He was brought in primarily by Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh, who spent millions, probably of their own money, to basically give the West Memphis Three the trial they never had. That was the purpose of their documentary. The story goes, according to, because I ordered the book immediately, and it took about 3 or 4 days to get here, and I opened it up. I didn't read the whole book. I just read the part about the West Memphis Three, and he talks about returning from Arkansas, and I think he even mentioned something about how hot it was there, which was true. And he ran into Ken Lanning, and he said, "Hey, Ken, I was told that the prosecutors in the West Memphis case actually called for help, and do you remember anything like that?" And Ken Lanning, who had debunked the theory of satanic ritual homicide, told him that if you try the case that way, you'll be laughed out of the courtroom. And of course, they didn't get laughed out of the courtroom because we're in the middle of the Bible Belt, and everybody takes the Bible literally and believes in Satan. I'm not mocking anybody's religion, but I'm just saying people in the Bible Belt react differently than other people in other places. So, which added to the satanic panic. But and Ken said, the next thing I knew, I'm reading in the paper they were all convicted. Douglas thought that was hilarious, that the prosecutors had called, and Ken said, he said, well, did they ever call you back? He said, no, they didn't call me back.
Mm-hmm.
And they did the same thing in the John Benet Ramsey case. The FBI told them what they thought, and they didn't like the FBI's.
The prosecution didn't like what the FBI was saying.
Exactly. Just the same thing as in the West Memphis case.
Yeah.
So,
and to put it in perspective a little bit, and this may not ring this. A lot of persons listening today, especially the younger audience, may not know what this means. But, I was looking up a lot of the local newspaper articles going on at the time in early May and early June of 1993 in your area. And I couldn't help but notice coming across a June 3rd, 1993 big advertisement for Billy Graham TV special titled The Value of a Soul was going to be on that night at 7 p.m. on WREG Channel 3. And that's what, 3-4 days before Jesse Misskelley gives the so-called confession to the police. And you have Billy Graham TV evangelist on the local network there delivering the special The Value of a Soul. So we had a little bit of that in the early 90s here in Ohio. Again, I was very young, so I don't have a great understanding of it, but I could only imagine how much stronger that was in the South.
it was palpable, and it's like I told Eddie Vedder at our first meeting. Somebody like Damien Echols, if you go to New York or L.A., there's 100 of them on the sidewalk walking down the street, gothic, and the dark makeup and all that jazz, but that doesn't happen in Northeast Arkansas, not even in Memphis. He stuck out like a sore thumb, and he was the perfect patsy.
Well, and he was young and dumb enough that he liked kind of sticking out.
Oh, he toyed with the cops, like they played with them and said, asked him, what do you think the killer would be thinking at the time that he was doing this? And the answer was real spooky. And it's just, the kid did not do himself any favors, and he understands that now. And I haven't seen him since Bruce Sinofsky's memorial at the Lincoln Center back in 2015, I believe. Gosh, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but it was. He's changed a tremendous amount. And of course, how could you not be affected by 18 years and 78 days in a 10 by 10 concrete tomb with nothing to do, 1 hour of being outside with nothing to do. I don't know how he survived it, but he said something about I was wearing a tie, and he said, "Hey Dan, are we supposed to get dressed up for this?" And I said, I don't know. This is just the way I dress when I go places, and because I didn't want to embarrass him. But I could tell it freaked him out. So it just and who wouldn't be? I really genuinely feel sorry for him, and I hope some of these people are right, and maybe my book did have some impact on the Arkansas Supreme Court's decision to send it back to the trial court for rethink the concept of testing the evidence with new DNA technology. And of course, what's good for Damien Echols is good for Jesse Misskelley and Jason Baldwin. So we've got a partial DNA. In fact, there's just not enough markers to put it in CODIS. We can exclude people, but not include them. So maybe this will get us to where we need to be. And here we still have the state of Arkansas fighting us tooth and nail. I say us because I consider it all of us in this together, even though I'm a judge. I don't practice law anymore, but here they are. Their first story was the evidence was lost in a flood. And then the second story was it burned up in a fire. And then suddenly it magically reappeared in the evidence room of all places. And so, they will not accept the fact that these kids didn't do it because it's going to make them look like what they are. and that is people who put the wrong people in prison and don't want to admit it.
The weather's getting warmer. Time to ditch the jackets and sweaters for shorts and tees. But there's no need to waste money on clothes that last only one season with Quince. Now, you can get high-quality pieces that never go out of style, that you'll be wearing year after year. Quince has all of the seasonal must-haves, like 100% European linen shirts from $30, performance polos, and versatile flow knit activewear. The best part? All Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. By partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes the savings on to us. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices, along with premium fabrics and finishes. I love Quince. I've been filling my closet with Quince, and I will be doing so in the warmer months as well. I'm buying high-quality pieces that never go out of style. They're always in fashion, and they last. They're durable, and they're quality. Upgrade your wardrobe. Go to quince.com/garage for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/garage to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/garage. The evidence keeps pouring in. At this point, the facts are undeniable. It's an open and shut case. Monopoly Go is the most fun you can have in a mobile game. Everyone is still talking about Monopoly Go for a good reason. It is an absolute hit. Millions of people pass Go every day because this game is always bringing something new to the table. Like countless crazy tournaments you can join with your friends as partners or teams. Or timed events offering bonuses like massive multipliers or rent frenzies to help you get huge rewards. And there's so many rewards to discover. Rare stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums. Delightful emojis to taunt people with when you raid their riches. Unique playing pieces and so much more. The verdict is in. With Monopoly Go, there's something new to discover every time you play. So don't miss out. Go download it now free on the App Store and Google Play. As a True Crime Garage listener, you know the world can be a dangerous and unpredictable place. With every case, we've learned one thing. Your best line of defense is your vigilance and preparation. That's why you should invest in Simply Safe Home Security today. Simply Safe was named Best Home Security Systems 2024 by the U.S. News and World Report. Newsweek ranked it Best Customer Service in Home Security. Whole home protection is what you get with Simply Safe. It's sensors to detect break-ins, fires, floods, and more. Plus, you can get a variety of indoor and outdoor cameras. It's backed by 24/7 professional monitoring for less than $1 a day. No contracts and a 60-day money-back guarantee. Simply Safe is simply one of the very best security systems that you can purchase for your home and your property. And I've been telling you about Simply Safe for years now and how great they are. But don't just take my word for it. U.S. News, World Report, and Newsweek are all saying, check out Simply Safe, one of the best in the business. Simply Safe has given me and many of my listeners real peace of mind. I want you to have it too. Get 20% off any new Simply Safe system when you sign up for Fast Protect monitoring. Just visit simplysafe.com/garage. That's simplysafe.com/garage. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Is it just me, or why does, you said the flood, and I don't know if this is the situation there, but I've run into this situation many times talking to detectives on cases that we cover, especially old cases, cold cases. why does the evidence room always seem to be in the basement of the building, right? The location that would be most affected should there be a flood.
Well, they said that they moved it to a different location to store it, which really they didn't have any obligation to keep it at all because the case was reached its legal conclusion. So, so they said it was off-site, and then they suddenly found it in the evidence room, and they moved the police station after the trials in '94, sometime after that, to an old bank building that had gone out of business. And so the evidence room was actually the bank vault. So it was well protected in there. But they denied they had it because they didn't want to deal with it. I'm still speaking without having had the benefit of reading the full opinion, but it looks like they're going to get to test the evidence to me. And that could have huge ramifications for the case. To give those people out there who are on the fence or who are completely convinced that they're guilty, let me ask them a question. And that question is, do you think that 3 kids accused of murdering 3 8-year-old kids would not roll over on each other?
Right.
That doesn't happen in real life.
Right. And in confession, air quotes, confession aside, that's the thing that I try to point out, because there's people that do say, well, Jesse Misskelley confessed 5, 6, 7, however many times. But as far as and yes, that does muddy the waters a little bit, but he could, as far as courts go, he could have confessed 1,000 different times, but he never was willing to do it in court when he was offered deals.
And the reason for that is people who have MR have this, and it's a sort of unique trait for people that have MR. They believe they cannot tell a lie in a courtroom. They can lie on a Bible sitting at the assistant warden's office at the prison in front of me. I've seen people lie on the Bible before. He wasn't there. He never was there, because when I showed him the police map of where I told him I needed a Bible and I needed a crime scene map and to white out where the bodies were located. And I finally got that, and I asked Misskelley to point to where the bodies were located, and he pointed to the large pike that goes across the 10-mile bayou, because that came up so many times during the trial. He was just guessing again. That's all he was doing. And so, but when it got down to are you going to testify or not, he said, I can't lie on those boys no more, because he couldn't lie in court because mentally handicapped people think that that's a mortal sin.
It's like a little child, right? The child wants to please the person they're interacting with. And it's almost like he wants to provide an answer that's the answer that you are seeking rather than the true answer.
Exactly. And Tim Durning, who was our post-conviction forensic psychologist, he's the one who interviewed Misskelley and provided his findings, which changed my whole impression of what Jesse Misskelley was capable of intellectually. I mean, it shocked me because I had no experience whatsoever in dealing with people who had MR or who were intellectually challenged. I couldn't understand, and it actually frustrated me that I couldn't understand, why can't this kid get the story right? And according to Dr. Durning, people with MR believe they can't tell a lie in the courtroom, but they can lie anywhere else they want to, but they can't do it in the courtroom. And in reading that in the transcript, I called Jason Baldwin one night. He didn't answer, but he called me the next day, and he said, I heard they offered you 5 years to testify against Damien. And he said, yep, they did.
A prison sentence of 5 years.
Yes. They offered me 5 years to testify against Damien, but I told them that.
Just so everybody out there listening completely understands, he's facing what? Life in prison?
Or the death penalty.
And instead, he's offered 5 years to turn on his friend for something that the state, or at least the prosecutors, are convinced that he is guilty of. And we know He doesn't 5 years. He doesn't take the 5-year deal.
I told Jason after he confirmed that, I said, you do understand that that would have basically been time served. He goes, yeah, that's what they told me. And I didn't take it. And he was willing to spend another 5 years waiting to get a new trial if necessary so that he could be exonerated. But instead, he sacrificed himself just like I did when I fell on my sword at the Rule 37 and told the truth. The other lawyers said, oh, no, we did this because it was strategy and we did a good job. And but I was the only one that told the truth.
Let me ask you this while we're talking about doing the wrong thing. And you can give me a short answer, a long answer, or you can say, Nick, I'm a judge. I don't feel comfortable answering that question.
Okay, this sounds like it's going to be exciting.
Do you think or have evidence of that somebody at the West Memphis Police Department sold Jesse Miskelly's so-called confession to the Commercial Appeal, the newspaper?
No, I could never find it. I firmly believe that it happened. I looked for it. I did.
How else could they there's no way that I did a word count on the newspaper article of Miskelly's confession on the June 7th, 1993 Commercial Appeal. It's the headline on the front page. It's 1,627 words about. It's practically his whole damn confession printed in the newspaper. It taints the jury pool, any possibility of jury
absolutely.
pool. So you're confident saying I think somebody sold it, right? There's probably some money that exchanged hands.
The only motive for doing that, other than money, was to get that information out there to taint the jury pool.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
And the only people who would have had that motive would be
Gitchell?
Somebody who just walked by and saw it the transcript sitting on a table, maybe a secretary or somebody at the police department, or even a victim's parent, which I don't believe. I think it was a cop, but I can't prove that. I wish I could. The closest I ever came was I was involved in a panel discussion with Mara Leverett and the former editor of the Mid-South Commercial Appeal, and which is now defunct. They're completely out of business. Newspapers are a thing of the past, pretty much. I asked him directly. I said, "Did you purchase that from a police officer or anybody else?" And he looked at me, and if body language is the answer, he did buy it from somebody, a cop, but he wouldn't answer the question. But and of course, he didn't have to answer the question, but just asking it and seeing his response was enough for me to know that he bought it from somebody. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been copyrighted. It's very rare for a true crime story to be copyrighted.
Yeah, by a newspaper.
In fact, I've never seen one, to be honest with you. They're like unicorns.
We already talked about Mark Byers, but obviously you've met all six of the parents of the victims.
I've never met or spoken to Mr. Moore or his wife.
They seem to be the two that are most kind of removed from everything, right?
Yeah, and you got to remember, and of course, you're in Ohio, I'm in Arkansas, but you know, the OJ trial I use as an example. Here's a case that they changed the venue to a larger courtroom to accommodate the press and the live coverage of the trial. And by doing so, they increased the number of African Americans in the jury pool.
Mm-hmm.
The riots were, I think, the year before, 92. And I guess that was Rodney King and all that stuff.
Yep.
And so you had a jury pool in L.A. who were very distrustful of the police. And in Arkansas, people will buy a cop their lunch, or restaurants will give them free coffee or food, and everybody believes that the cops are your best friend. And for the most part, they are. But there are some who aren't. so we to compare those juries, we had a jury that was distrustful of the police. Then we had Mark Furman, who said he never used the N word, but they had him on tape saying it repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
In our case, we had a jury pool who believed everything the police would tell them if the sky was green and had yellow polka dots.
Right.
So it's two different situations, and I think I pointed it out in the book that I think both juries got it wrong for the wrong reason.
Yep.
It's just and of course in any case, whether it's high profile or not, a jury is only as good as the evidence in front of it. And Burnett would not let us put on our case because he knew what would happen. We almost won the case. We had 5 votes for acquittal in the first round of voting in the jury room.
Which is amazing considering the circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. Had Dr. Oshay been permitted to testify, you and I might be having the same conversation, but it would have been 30 years ago instead of now. and I would be a conzillionaire.
Of course. But with the parents of the victims, from my general understanding, it sounds like of the 6 that likely maybe 3 of them were swayed the other way of thinking that the West Memphis 3 were innocent eventually. Mark Byers, his wife, is hard to say because unfortunately she passed away years ago. Pam Hobbs, of course, has been very vocal at times saying that she believes that the West Memphis 3 are innocent. But the Moores seem to, from my understanding, still believe that they're guilty. And of course, Terry Hobbs as well. Maybe Dana Moore may have wavered on that a little bit at times. I don't know.
She did, but I never spoke to her. I did speak to Terry Hobbs one time.
I've actually spoken to Terry Hobbs a couple. He said that he would do an interview with me if I sent him the questions in advance, and I sent him the same questions that the FBI said to ask every person that you interview to the West Memphis 3 because I thought,
I'm sorry to be laughing, but that's hilarious.
Is that what I thought? It was a good idea because
I think it's brilliant.
I'm not trying to put any of the parents through anything, but it's like, well, these were the questions we were asking people that we knock on the doors of, but I've been doing this long enough to know that the younger the victim, the smaller their social circle, the less suspects you have. And so he told me, I'll answer any question you give me. So I sent him the same ones that the FBI told the West Memphis PD to ask everybody that they encounter, the same questions that Jesse Miskelly would have answered and Damian Eccles would have answered. And well, I was going to say between me and you, but there's going to be 100,000 people that hear this. All of a sudden, a family emergency came up, and we never did the interview.
He couldn't make it. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, you said you talked to Terry.
I did. I had a strange encounter with him during the second trial. I didn't go in the courtroom because there was a live feed in the hallway, and so I was just kind of watching, just because I was curious, obviously. And I stepped out of the courtroom to go back to Paragould, where I live, and he approached me. And at first I thought, I'm fixing to get cussed out here.
Right.
He's not a very big fellow. I wasn't worried about my safety. But he came up to me and quite graciously said, "Hey, I think you did a good job for Miskelly, and I know you're just doing your job." And was actually very kind. And I was stunned by that. Not stunned, surprised. I was stunned when his DNA link showed up on the shoestrings of Michael Moore. That was a shock.
Well, let me interrupt you here for a second, because I was trying to find this the other day, and you probably won't know it off the top of your head, but I remember 6-7 years ago when I was looking at this case that the boys, of course, they're tied up with the shoelaces, but they're not necessarily tied up with their own shoelaces, right? Like some of them were tied up with another boy's shoelaces. I only go down that road because I think obviously like it wouldn't be out of bounds to find something of Terry Hobbs' DNA at that scene, especially when Stevie Branch, who lives with him 24/7 in the same house, but then it's a different victim, Michael Moore. But I don't recall offhand whose shoelaces tied up Michael Moore.
I do recall it was Michael Moore's.
Okay. Percentage wise, less likely that you would find Terry Hobbs's DNA on Michael Moore's shoelaces.
Let me answer the question this way. And there's more evidence against Terry Hobbs than any of the West Memphis Three.
Yes.
And but do I think Terry Hobbs did it? Not without some proof. I don't. I think we're dealing with a serial killer.
I get why a lot of people have kind of turned on Terry Hobbs. And I know you said you were kind of surprised, and yes, you're surprised because I don't think you're saying you were surprised by his demeanor toward you because he's under suspicion. I think you're saying that because you were surprised by his demeanor because you're trying to exonerate the persons that were accused of the crimes.
Yeah, I mean that whole encounter has really kind of haunted me all these years.
He was very nice when he spoke with me, and not that means anything, but
well, he does have a history of violence. He shot Pam's sister,
or her brother, I think, right?
Or her sister, her brother. Yeah. Yes, his brother-in-law, and he got out of it by essentially saying, "Well, I'm a victim of the West Memphis 3 case." And
but those two had a volatile relationship, don't you think?
They did, and there's no doubt about that. But you know, I'm not going to point a finger at Terry Hobbs at this stage in the proceedings because I don't think there's enough there. Not yet. There may be after we get some more DNA testing done.
Well, let's go down the serial killer route.
All right.
You want to expand on that? Or do you feel comfortable expanding on that a little bit? I mean, there were other child murders in the area, and and what is so bizarre is some of them took place in May, and I'm not a big believer that it's like on TV or in the movies where these killers operate on a calendar, so to speak, or fascinated by numbers or anything like that. But do you think that this really involves the Blue Beacon and the traffic through the area, or do you think it's somebody very local?
If you look at the crime scene overhead map, or the sketches that were made by the police, that truck stop was immediately adjacent to the place where they found the bodies in the wooded area. You could literally throw a baseball. So if you parked up against the back, and in the photograph that HBO took, it shows the trucks backed up as far away from as they could get from anybody else in the parking lot, which is someone like 10 acres or maybe more, and which means they didn't want to be bothered for whatever reason. I don't remember whether I addressed this in the book or not. I've slept a couple times since then, not many, but a few. Those shoelaces were tied in such a way that I don't think they were designed to keep them from running or getting away. I think they were designed as carrying handles because you had left foot to left ankle, right. Or what am I saying? Left wrist,
left to left, right to right. You think they were killed elsewhere?
I do. There
was no blood found.
There would have had to have been a tremendous amount of blood. Different location, or in the back of an empty 18-wheeler, or in the cab of an 18-wheeler. The best job to have if you're a serial killer is a truck driver, so that you can be 6 states away by the time they find the bodies. And there's no connection.
And the FBI has told us that for years, since the 90s, in fact. And so you think it was somebody, you lean toward the idea that it would have been somebody that was not local, that would have had the ability to move on very quickly.
Yes, I do. And
do you have anybody in particular?
I do, but I don't want to share that because I don't want to impede my investigation.
But it would be a name that persons that would be, it would be a name that what is not in the Paradise Lost movies or not in West Memphis 3 books.
I've never spoken to anyone about it without an NDA agreement.
Right.
But I can place a over the road truck driver in the area, the immediate area, who confessed to killing someone and told the police exactly where the body would be found, and it was found exactly where he said it was in 1992.
Does it have anything to do with the Bojangles?
No, I don't think so at all.
Do you think that's one of the biggest missteps in this whole?
I think it was, and I'm not saying this because for the truth of the matter asserted, I'm saying it because I believe that is why that blood never made it to Little Rock, to the crime lab, because they didn't want it to match anything because they already had their 3 guys wrapped up. That's just my belief, but I find it strangely coincidental, and I really don't believe in coincidences. And on the night that the kids come up missing and the patrol is out looking for these 3 kids, and they get a call from a fast food place saying, hey, this guy just stumbled into our ladies' restroom and bled everywhere in there, and saturated a roll of toilet paper with blood, left behind some bloody sunglasses, which would have had fingerprints on them. And the cop pulls through the drive-thru and says, throw it away, we don't care. And so by the time they found the bodies the next day, they suddenly cared enough to come and take the blood sample, but Brian Ridge testified that he lost it and it never got sent to the crime lab, because by then they had their guys and they had their story and they had to stick to it, even though the FBI told them they were full of, however you want to phrase it.
Again, if you give me the answer, Nick, I'm a judge and I don't feel comfortable answering this question, I'll be fine with that. But what do you think? And I know this is pure speculation, complete, absolute speculation, and it's probably not fair that I'm asking this, but I've met Jason Baldwin very briefly. So you are the person that is the closest to this case that I've had this level of interaction with. What would be your speculation as to what maybe Officer Regina Meeks might have seen had she brushed off the mosquitoes and walked into the woods that night?
Well, I mean, it's obviously speculation. She wouldn't get out of the car to walk into the fast food restaurant, and she could have at the very least, bagged up the toilet paper roll saturated with blood and the sunglasses. But she told the manager to throw them away, and they were gone by the time they got there the next day and suddenly were interested. Somehow, again, for reasons unknown that I can't prove, other than what the testimony of the officer was, he says, I just lost it.
Right.
How do you lose that? I mean, that could be the most important evidence in the case. And how do you just lose something like that? And the reason she wouldn't get out of her car to walk into the woods is because if you've ever been to Arkansas in May, the mosquitoes are horrible.
They're hungry.
And very hungry.
Yeah.
And several of the officers stated that they quit searching because of the mosquitoes.
But potentially could have seen.
Well, they could have seen bodies floating. You know, whoever dumped those bodies there, and, you know, one person could have, with those ligatures, carried a kid that weighed 50 pounds in each hand and carry 2 of them at once and dump them in. Of course, they make this big deal about the clothes being stuck in the mud. After all the things they've said that weren't true, how do you believe them on that? Of course, they did everything wrong at the crime scene. They didn't drain the water first. They felt around and after they removed the bodies, but they should have drained it before they lifted the bodies out. But instead, they trampled it before they did the right thing. So, I mean, it was out of their league. And just like this case was out of my league in 1993. And but I'd love to have the chance to try it again. But the offered plea has deprived me of that. So,
do you think that it's one killer or multiple killers?
Well, if you believe the Handle theory, I mean, I've never tested it,
Right.
but I mean, it seems logical, because if you're a truck driver, the last thing you want to do is dump the bodies somewhere other than nearby, because you don't want to be pulled over, 3 dead 8-year-olds in the back of your truck. So that's why it was a dump site. And also, you'd want to be getting the heck out of there before they were found, so you could get to the next Blue Beacon truck wash and clean out your truck
Yeah.
and disappear into.
You only need them to be concealed long enough for you to get out of Dodge.
Exactly. Terry Hobbs's alibi is weird and suspicious, to say the least. But again, until we have some evidence that a prosecutor would actually use to prosecute, it's not going to happen. And the sad truth of the matter is, even if they did prosecute him, it doesn't mean that it's an automatic exoneration or pardon for Memphis 3. They're already out of prison. So even if they found the right guy and corroborated the confession or corroborated through DNA or whatever, and nobody has the ambition to do that. The authorities here in Arkansas think this is a closed deal. And that's why I wrote the book, so that I could reopen the case to some extent and get people's minds thinking. I had 2 retired FBI profilers visit with me at the crime scene, and they both agreed that this was a serial killer lust crime because of it being adjacent to the crime scene, the truck wash and the truck stop. And I know John Douglas's theory is different. I think he's a firm believer that somebody these kids knew were responsible, and he's a much better profiler than I am. When I got called to Quantico, I turned it down. Sometimes I wish I hadn't, because my life would have been dramatically different.
Now, I'll give you one last question, and I'll let you go, Judge. And I so appreciate your time tonight, and thank you for all of your insights into this case. I know that the audience is going to enjoy it, and even more reason for them to go out and pick up the book. But a question that constantly comes up in this case is there's several eyewitnesses in the neighborhood with the young boys that say that, at times when they were kind of running through the neighborhood and having a good old time, Christopher, Stevie, and Michael, that they were spotted with a 4th boy. At anything that you've reviewed in this case or your investigation, was that 4th child ever identified?
I believe the closest that anybody's ever come to finding out who that was Aaron Hutchinson.
That it might have been Aaron Hutchinson, and then he had departed from the group before probably that 6:30 timeline.
Well, I don't think so that day. I think that his mother, Victoria, had moved into a different school district. And so I think that they hadn't been friends in a while, but used to be close friends. But it had been quite some time since they had hung out and they weren't in the same school district anymore.
And so that 4th child that may have been hanging out briefly with the boys that evening, as far as we know, has not been fully identified, or it could be misremembering by.
Well, I'll be honest with you, and this is a 32-year-old memory. I don't recall there ever being a mention of a 4th boy, other than Aaron Hutchinson making the claim that he witnessed the murders from their fort that they had built in the patch of woods, but there was no fort. And even the prosecutors were skeptical enough not to call him to the stand. In fact, they hit him out so nobody else could.
Exactly. Because the things he was saying was so fantastical, they didn't make any sense at all. At all. So, Judge Stidham, I appreciate your time this evening. It's been a fascinating conversation. The book is the best book about this case since Mara Leverett's book in 2002. It's a must own. It's a must read for everybody out there that has been intrigued about this case all of these years later. And I appreciate your candor and your optimism that maybe that we could find who was in fact responsible one day.
Well, if I may end with two quotes, one being Churchill and became my mantra throughout this entire process was never, ever, ever give up. Perseverance does pay off in the end. No, there's no question about that. John Douglas told me to find the artist, look at the artwork.
West Memphis 3. West Memphis 3.
Damien Eccles and Jason Baldwin, Jesse Miss Kelly, who
West Memphis 3.
They were just 8 years old. Stephen Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers found murdered, hog-tied and naked in a drainage ditch in West Memphis.
West Memphis 3.
stands behind the convictions.
West Memphis 3. West Memphis 3. West Memphis 3.